Humanity had waited a long time for this moment. For more than 200 years, humans had watched the galaxy from a distance. They had listened to alien broadcasts, studied star maps, and learned the rules of interstellar behavior without ever stepping fully into the wider community. Humans were careful by nature. They knew one mistake could turn curiosity into extinction. Now, that waiting was over. The Galactic Assembly had finally approved humanity's entry. Thousands of species gathered on Valaris Prime, a massive space station that floated like a silver crown around a blue giant star. The station was older than most civilizations. Every wall carried the marks of ancient alliances and forgotten wars. Captain Elias Rowan stood near the edge of the great hall, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes forward. He wore the formal uniform of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, simple, clean, and deliberately unthreatening. No weapons, no sharp edges. Humans wanted to look calm, reasonable, and respectful. Elias had been chosen for one reason above all others: control. He was not the strongest human, nor the smartest, but he was steady. When things went wrong, he did not panic. When people shouted, he listened. When fear rose, he breathed and waited. That skill would be tested sooner than anyone expected. The Valari Queen had not yet arrived, but her presence was already felt. Alien guards lined the hall, tall and armored, their glowing eyes scanning every movement. Conversations were quiet. Even powerful species spoke softly here. The Valari ruled a vast region of space. They were not cruel, but they were proud. Their queen was more than a leader. She was a symbol of balance, order, and unbroken tradition. Elias reviewed everything he knew. Valari body language, Valari customs, Valari taboos. Touching another being without permission was considered deeply disrespectful. Touching royalty was unthinkable. He reminded himself to stay still, observe, speak only when spoken to. The floor beneath his boots vibrated softly. Artificial gravity systems adjusted as the station shifted position around the star. Elias barely noticed. His training kept his balance automatically. A deep tone echoed through the hall. The Queen was arriving. The massive doors opened, revealing a procession of light and color. The Valari Queen entered, tall and imposing, her form covered in ceremonial armor that shimmered like living crystal. The armor flowed around her body in elegant curves, not sharp like human battle gear. It was art as much as protection. Every being in the hall lowered themselves in respect. Elias followed the example, bowing his head slightly, eyes lowered, not fully submissive, but respectful. Exactly as protocol demanded, the Queen moved forward, her presence commanding silence. Her gaze swept across the gathered representatives, measuring, judging. When her eyes passed over the human delegation, they lingered for half a second longer than expected. Humans noticed everything. Then it happened. The station jolted. It was not violent, but sudden, a minor correction in rotation, barely worth mentioning in engineering reports. But in a hall filled with different gravity preferences and unfamiliar movement patterns, it mattered. Instinct took over. Before thought could catch up, his hand reached out to steady himself against what he believed was a decorative pillar beside him. His fingers made contact with smooth, warm material, not metal. His brain screamed a warning too late. The room froze. Elias realized with perfect clarity that his hand was not on a pillar. It was on the Queen's ceremonial armor, on a rear extension of the design, part of her personal form, considered intimate by Valari standards. Time seemed to stop. Elias pulled his hand back instantly, stepping away, his face calm, but his mind racing. He did not speak. He did not move further. He knew that any sudden action could be misunderstood. The Queen turned slowly. Her eyes burned with cold fury. The silence was shattered by her voice, amplified across the hall. How dare you touch my ass, human? Gasps rippled through the assembly. Several species recoiled. Others leaned back in shock. Guards raised their weapons in perfect unison, energy fields humming to life. The human delegation did not move. Elias stood straight, hands visible, heart steady despite the danger. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. One reflex, one mistake. Billions of lives balanced on this moment. The Queen stepped closer. Each step echoed like a judgment. "You will explain," she said, her voice sharp, controlled, and dangerous. "Or your species will leave this hall in pieces." Elias met her gaze calmly, just enough to show honesty without challenge. "It was an accident, Your Radiance," he said evenly. "A gravity shift. I lost balance. No disrespect was intended." Whispers spread like fire. Excuses were common in the galaxy. Apologies were expected. But something about the way Elias spoke, direct, simple, without fear, caught attention. The Queen studied him closely.
"You claim ignorance," she said. "No," Elias replied.
"I claim responsibility." That answer changed the mood. Many species avoided responsibility at all costs. They blamed technology, fate, or misunderstandings. Humans, it seemed, chose a different path. The Queen gestured sharply. Guards moved in, surrounding Elias without touching him. "You will be detained," she said. "Your intent will be examined. If deception is found, your people will be judged unworthy of trust." Elias nodded once. Understood. He did not resist, as energy restraints locked around his wrists. The human delegation watched in silence, faces controlled but tense. They had trained for rejection. They had trained for hostility, but no training truly prepared them for this. As Elias was escorted away, the Queen addressed the assembly. "Let this be recorded," she declared. The human species stands on trial, not for aggression, but for character. Across the hall, alien representatives exchanged uneasy glances. Some felt satisfaction. Humans had embarrassed themselves on their first appearance. Others felt curiosity. A species that accepted blame so calmly, even when facing destruction, was rare. Deep within the station, Elias was placed in a quiet chamber. No chains, no harsh lights, just stillness. He stood alone, breathing slowly, replaying the moment, again and again. He did not regret reaching out. Instinct had saved him from falling. But instinct, he knew, was not an excuse, only an explanation. Outside the chamber, unseen, sensors observed him. The Queen herself watched the recordings in silence. She had expected panic. She had expected lies. Instead, she saw a being who remained steady under the weight of a galaxy. And for the first time since the incident, doubt touched her certainty. Perhaps this human had not reached out in insult. Perhaps he had reached out the way his kind always did, to keep from falling. The chamber where Elias was held was quiet. There were no guards inside, only sensors that recorded every movement and word. The walls were smooth and curved, glowing faintly with soft light. Elias looked around carefully. It was not a prison in the way humans understood it, but it felt like one. Every corner, every shadow, every sound was watched. He did not panic. He never panicked. He reminded himself of the mission. Humanity had waited for this chance for centuries, and one mistake could undo all of it. He could not allow fear to control him. Minutes passed, then hours. Then a voice came from the speakers embedded in the walls. It was the Queen. Her tone was calm but still sharp. "Human," she said. "Explain your species. Why do you claim responsibility instead of excuses?" Elias bowed his head slightly, as he would in any diplomatic meeting. "Your Radiance, humans do not always have the same customs as your people. We make mistakes. We admit them. We learn from them. That is how we survive. There was silence, a long silence. Then another voice joined hers. One of the senior Valari advisors spoke.
You speak of survival, human.
But your species interfered with the Queen's person. Do you think this is trivial? Berberge, do you think words alone can fix your error? Elias looked up. No, he said calmly. Words alone do not fix anything. Actions do. That is why I am here. I will accept any challenge you set.
I will prove that humans are not reckless, that we can be trusted.
The chamber vibrated slightly. A small panel opened in the wall, revealing a holographic display. It projected a circular symbol rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. The Queen's voice came again. You will face the trial of intent. This is an ancient Valari tradition. All species who are accused of serious disrespect must undergo it. The trial tests mind, body, and spirit. Failure brings punishment. Success may allow your species a chance in the assembly. Elias nodded. He understood the gravity of what she said. This trial was not just about him. It was about all humans. One wrong move, and humanity could be judged unworthy of entering the galaxy's political system. The first test appeared immediately. A puzzle formed in the air, a floating 3-dimensional shape that rotated and split into multiple sections. Lights flashed along its surfaces. A voice explained the rules. Elias had to assemble the pieces into the correct pattern before the timer ran out. If he failed, the trial would escalate to a more dangerous stage. Elias studied the puzzle carefully. It was alien logic, unlike anything he had ever seen. Each section responded to a specific movement, and moving one piece affected the others. Many humans would panic at such a challenge, but Elias did not. He took a deep breath. He began to move the pieces. Slowly at first, then with more confidence as he noticed the patterns. His hand movements were deliberate, precise. He remembered a lesson his mentor had taught him. In moments of chaos, observe first, act second. Minutes passed. The timer counted down. Sweat formed on his brow. But finally, with a quiet click, the final piece slid into place. The puzzle stabilized. The lights stopped flashing. The trial acknowledged his success. The Queen's voice came again. Impressive. Many species would have failed that stage. You have skill, human. But skill alone does not prove intent. You must also demonstrate character. The next stage began. The chamber shifted. Walls moved to create a narrow corridor filled with holographic projections of alien citizens. Each projection presented a moral dilemma. Elias would hear their voices, each one pleading for help in situations that seemed impossible. One projection showed a city under attack. Humans could save either a group of children or a group of soldiers. Both options had consequences. Elias hesitated, then made a choice. He guided the children to safety first. Later, he would find a way to warn the soldiers. His choice reflected human values. Protect the innocent, then mitigate damage wherever possible. Another projection presented a scenario where a human could gain great advantage by betraying a trusted ally. Elias refused. He chose loyalty and honesty, even though it would make the task more difficult. Throughout the trial, the chamber's observers noted something remarkable. Elias never complained. He never panicked. He never tried to trick the system. He followed his instincts, reasoning, and moral compass. The final test was physical. The chamber transformed into a simulation of the Valari capital, under threat from a massive natural disaster. Elias had to navigate unstable ground, falling debris, and hazardous energy fields. Most species would have rushed blindly, hoping luck would save them. Elias moved cautiously, scanning every path. When he saw an obstacle that threatened a projection of innocent citizens, he changed course to avoid harm, even when it slowed him. By the end of the simulation, Elias emerged, unharmed. More importantly, the holographic citizens were safe. The Queen and her advisors observed his every move, taking notes. "Human," the Queen finally said, her voice steady but impressed. "You have completed the trial. Many species fail at least one stage. You have passed all. Yet I am not fully convinced. Tell me, why do you act this way? Why do humans take responsibility, even when it may cost everything?" Elias took a deep breath. "Your Radiance, survival is not only about strength. It is about trust, intelligence, and responsibility.
Humans are not perfect. We make mistakes.
But we correct them. We do not hide from them. That is how we survive and thrive. That is why we must be trusted to join the galaxy, not feared." The chamber was silent. Even the most skeptical Volari advisors remained quiet. Elias had not spoken arrogantly. He had not made threats. He had not tried to charm anyone. He had only stated the truth. Outside the chamber, the galaxy waited. Reports of the trial were already spreading. Other species whispered among themselves. Some admired human courage. Some feared it. One thing was clear. Humans were different. They were not predictable. They were principled. The Queen paused. For the first time, she allowed a small gesture of recognition, a subtle incline of her head. It was enough to show that Elias had passed not only the trial, but also a test of perception. She turned to her advisors.
Record this carefully. This human did not fail.
He did not bend the rules. He did not compromise his principles. His actions, though risky, demonstrated an unexpected strength of character. We must consider what this means for humanity's role in the galaxy. Elias was released from the chamber. Guards escorted him back to the main hall. The Queen herself did not speak to him again that day, but her gaze lingered. It was not anger now. It was curiosity, and perhaps a hint of respect. The human delegation gathered around Elias, relief on their faces. Some whispered questions. Some offered congratulations. Elias remained calm. He reminded them that the trial was only the beginning. Humanity's first impression had been rocky. The second was better. But the galaxy would watch every move from now on. As they prepared to leave the hall, Elias glanced back at the Queen. She stood tall, armored in ceremonial crystal, a silent observer of the human who had dared to reach out in a moment of instinct. In that moment, Elias understood something crucial. Humans were not just participants in the galaxy. They were a new force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy had noticed. The news of Elias's success traveled quickly across the Volari assembly. Every species that had attended the ceremony whispered about it in quiet corners, exchanging cautious glances. Some admired the human calm and courage. Some feared the unexpected principles and steadfast honesty that humans had displayed. Few had expected such a small species to pass a trial designed to expose weakness. But for Elias, there was no time to celebrate. The trial of intent had ended. Yes, but the political challenge was just beginning. The Queen had made it clear, one misstep, one misunderstanding, and humanity's place in the assembly would vanish. Humanity would be remembered only as a reckless species, unfit for cooperation. Elias returned to the human delegation in the hall. His face was calm, but his mind was already planning the next step. The Queen had not yet given humanity a seat at the assembly. She had only observed. Now humans had to prove they were not only principled, but also useful, intelligent, and capable. The first sign of the next challenge came quickly. As the delegation prepared to leave, alarms sounded across the station. A ship, unknown to the assembly, had entered the Volari airspace without clearance. Its design was strange, asymmetric, and clearly built for speed and evasion. No distress signals, no diplomatic codes. Just a silent ship moving unpredictably. The Queen's advisors panicked. Several species immediately called for attack authorization. "Destroy it," one shouted. "We cannot risk unknown technology near the capital." Elias raised a hand, steady and calm. "Wait," he said. "We do not know its intent. It may be hostile, or it may be lost. Destroying it without information could create enemies we do not want." The room fell silent. For a moment, the idea of waiting seemed impossible to others. Most species were accustomed to swift action, to aggression as a default solution. But the human voice cut through the panic. It was not arrogant, it was reasoned. The Queen observed him carefully. "Explain, human," she said. "How do you propose to assess this threat?" Elias looked around the hall, scanning the technology and protocols of the Volari station. He noticed the communication nodes, the sensor arrays, the AI-assisted analysis systems. Humans were not the fastest physically, but their minds were creative. They could improvise. "We can use their own system against them," he said. "We can project an invitation to dock. We can send a controlled drone with a human operator to assess the ship. If it is hostile, we retreat. If it is friendly or neutral, we gain valuable information." Several species muttered. It seemed overly cautious, too clever, but the Queen allowed it. Her eyes narrowed. "You will take responsibility for this operation, human. One mistake, and the consequences will fall on your species." Elias nodded once. "Understood, Your Radiance." Within minutes, a small Volari drone was fitted with human interface controls. Elias placed his hands on the holographic interface and began to operate it. Unlike most species, he did not rely solely on direct controls. He improvised, using the drone's sensors to analyze patterns, anticipate movement, and plan several outcomes at once. The unknown ship slowed as the drone approached. It rotated in a pattern that suggested scanning rather than attack. Elias adjusted his commands subtly, sending signals designed to communicate non-hostile intent. He projected a calm energy signature, a pattern of pulses that Volari observers recognized as diplomatic. The ship responded. Its systems mirrored the pulses, almost as if acknowledging Elias's method. Then, unexpectedly, a small hatch opened, and a beam of light scanned the drone. A holographic figure appeared inside the ship, humanoid, but clearly alien, holding hands together in a gesture of peace. The Queen leaned forward. "Explain this, human." Elias did not hesitate. "This species may be lost or cautious. By showing patience and intelligence, we have prevented escalation. They see our intent. They trust it." The unknown ship docked peacefully. Its crew, small in number but highly advanced in technology, began communicating with the Volari. They carried information about a dangerous energy fluctuation in a nearby star system. If ignored, it could destabilize nearby planets and even threaten space stations like Valaris Prime. The Queen's advisors whispered furiously. Several species immediately plotted to use this information for political advantage. Elias raised his hand again. "We must not manipulate this information. The lives at risk are greater than politics. If we do not act, countless lives will be lost. This is our priority." For the first time, the Queen allowed herself a small smile. Elias had done more than survive a trial. He had shown practical intelligence, foresight, and moral clarity, qualities that were rare in the galaxy. The next days were intense. The human delegation worked closely with the Volari engineers to deploy mitigation systems to stabilize the star. Humans contributed ideas that no Volari system had anticipated. They calculated energy flows, proposed adjustments to orbital satellites, and suggested manual overrides that combined human intuition with alien technology. At one point, a critical satellite appeared to be malfunctioning. The station's automated systems recommended shutting it down, which would delay the operation by hours. Elias observed the readings and noticed a subtle pattern. The satellite was responding to the energy fluctuation, not failing. He proposed a controlled recalibration instead. The Valari engineers hesitated. "That is risky," one said. "We may lose the satellite entirely." Elias's response was calm but firm. "We lose nothing by trying to guide it. The risk is minimal compared to the cost of inaction. Trust the method, not fear." They followed his instructions. Within minutes, the satellite stabilized and energy readings normalized. The crisis was averted. Across the galaxy, news of the human intervention began to spread. Other species, who had initially mocked humans for the accidental touch, now watched with caution. The humans had solved a crisis that could have destroyed valuable systems. They had done it with intelligence, not aggression. They had done it with calm, clear reasoning and responsibility. The Queen summoned Elias again. She did not speak immediately. She observed him, watched the delegation, listened to reports. Then she said,
"Human, you have demonstrated not only responsibility, but utility."
"You have acted decisively when others hesitated. You have shown courage without recklessness." Helios bowed his head slightly. "Your Radiance, humanity does not seek glory. We seek understanding. We act because it is necessary, not because it serves politics or pride." The Queen's eyes softened for the first time. "Your words are rare. Most species seek advantage first. You act differently." "I will consider this carefully." Despite the praise, Elias knew the work was far from over. The Queen's respect had limits. Other species remained skeptical. Humans still had to prove they could handle diplomacy, alliances, and crises simultaneously. One misstep could erase decades of careful effort. Even so, Elias felt a quiet satisfaction. They had survived the first true test. They had turned a disastrous first impression into a demonstration of principle and skill. They had begun to show the galaxy what humans were capable of. That evening, Elias walked through the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Countless systems, countless species, countless possibilities stretched beyond the station. Humanity had entered the galaxy not quietly, but with an unmistakable statement. They were here to stay, and they were not weak. The Queen watched him from afar, still analyzing, still testing, silently, but for the first time, she acknowledged something important. Humans were unpredictable. They could survive, adapt, and excel. They could face trials without fear and solve problems others deemed impossible, and that unpredictability was exactly what made them powerful. As the stars stretched endlessly before him, Elias realized that this was only the beginning. The accidental touch, the trial, the crisis, they were all lessons. Every moment of observation, every challenge, every interaction would shape humanity's place in the galaxy. The Queen would continue to watch. The other species would continue to doubt. But Elias and his delegation had learned an essential truth. Humans had something that no species could replicate fully: courage, intellect, and principle combined. In the quiet of the observation deck, Elias allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy was dangerous. The galaxy was unpredictable. But humanity had begun to show it, that when instinct, intelligence, and responsibility worked together, even a small species could command respect. And soon the galaxy would understand that humans were not to be underestimated. The following days in the Valari assembly were tense. Every species watched closely, some with admiration, others with suspicion. Humans had survived the first trial, prevented a crisis, and demonstrated intelligence beyond expectation. Yet the Queen had not yet given them a formal place among the assembly. Elias understood that patience was as important as action. Humans had learned to wait, observe, and adapt. Now, waiting was part of the challenge. Every meeting, every diplomatic conversation, every recorded gesture was a test. The Queen had made it clear Nothing would be given freely. Respect had to be earned. The Queen summoned Elias again, not with anger this time, but with careful deliberation. The grand chamber of the assembly was full, representatives from hundreds of species gathered in silence. The Queen's presence dominated the room, as always, but there was a new undertone: curiosity and interest, not just authority. "Human," the Queen said, her voice calm but carrying weight. "You have acted with caution, intelligence, and principle. You have survived trials, prevented disaster, and guided others when fear might have prevailed. Yet I must determine if your species can endure diplomacy, alliances, and conflict simultaneously. The galaxy is not safe for those who are careless." Elias nodded. He did not hesitate. "Your Radiance. Humans have survived for millennia in harsh environments, both on our homeworld and among unknown neighbors. We learn quickly. We adapt. We act with responsibility. We are ready to contribute." The Queen studied him for several long moments. Then she turned to the assembly. "I propose a test," she said. "Not a trial of survival or skill, but a challenge of diplomacy. If humans succeed, I will grant them a permanent seat in the Galactic Assembly. If they fail, they will be restricted to observation only for the next century." The room buzzed. Several species whispered among themselves. Some tried to find weaknesses. Some silently hoped the humans would fail. But Elias remained calm. This was another challenge, another opportunity to show the galaxy what humans were capable of. The challenge was immediate. A dispute had erupted on a distant colony world in the galaxy's border region. Two species, the Thoraxi and the Solari, both claimed rights to mining resources. Both were armed, tense, and ready to escalate to violence. The assembly wanted humans to mediate the conflict. Elias's delegation prepared quickly. They studied maps, reports, and histories. They learned the culture, traditions, and motivations of both sides. Then, Elias acted. He requested a private meeting with representatives of both species before public discussions began. Many species doubted that a human could achieve anything. Most expected compromise to fail. Humans were small, unarmed, and inexperienced in interstellar diplomacy. But Elias approached the challenge with a different method. Listen first, understand second, act third. The Thoraxi representatives were proud and blunt, quick to anger. The Solari were cautious and strategic, slow to trust. Elias spoke first, calmly, explaining that he was not there to judge, but to find a solution that respected both parties. He acknowledged the concerns of both species. He admitted that humans were outsiders, but that their perspective could offer clarity. At first, neither side trusted him. Words alone were not enough. But Elias had prepared. He used human reasoning to show consequences. If the dispute escalated to violence, both sides would lose not only resources, but also trade partnerships with nearby systems. Then he proposed a solution: temporary shared rights, monitored by an independent council composed of neutral species. He expected objections. They came immediately. Both sides feared deception. Elias responded not with force or threats, but with careful logic. He presented contingency plans, safety measures, and incentives for cooperation. He answered questions honestly and directly, never hiding information or trying to manipulate the discussion. Hours passed. Tensions rose. Aliens raised voices, stomped, gestured sharply. Elias remained steady. He noticed small patterns, the way the Thoraxi shifted their weight when lying, the way the Solari repeated phrases to test honesty. Using only observation, patience, and calm reasoning, he adjusted his proposals subtly. By the end of the day, an agreement was reached. Both species signed the plan, reluctantly, but sincerely. They left with a cautious sense of trust, not only toward each other but toward humans. The assembly took notice. They had not expected success. Humans had turned a potential war into peace, not by force, but by intelligence, patience, and principle. The Queen stood and addressed the assembly. "Let it be recorded," she said. "The human species has passed not only the trial of intent and practical problem-solving, but also diplomacy. They have shown clarity, wisdom, and moral integrity beyond what many species achieve in centuries." Elias and his delegation bowed. There were whispers of astonishment and grudging respect. The galaxy had begun to understand that humans were not reckless, not weak, not ordinary. Humans were principled, clever, and capable of seeing solutions others could not. Later, when the assembly had dispersed, the Queen spoke directly to Elias. "Your species surprises me," she said softly, her voice carrying no anger, only reflection. "You stumble as all mortals do, yet when it matters, you rise. You act with integrity, courage, and intelligence. You are not what I expected, human."
You are formidable in ways I did not anticipate.
Elias bowed slightly. "Your radiance. Humans do not seek to surprise. We act because it is necessary. We act for others, as well as ourselves. That is our strength." The Queen considered his words. Then, with a subtle gesture, she extended her hand, an unprecedented act of recognition. "Humanity will have a permanent seat in the Galactic Assembly. You will be observed, listened to, and respected, not for your power, not for your weapons, but for your principles and your clarity." It was a victory unlike any other. Humans had arrived in the galaxy not as conquerors, not as manipulators, but as a species to be reckoned with. They had turned an embarrassing first contact into a demonstration of skill, intelligence, and moral courage. Across the stars, species who had doubted humans began to reconsider. Traders, explorers, scientists, and diplomats noted that humans were careful, clever, and principled. They had survived crises, solved impossible problems, and mediated conflicts without resorting to violence. They had earned respect through action, observation, and integrity. Elias returned to the observation deck, looking out at the vast galaxy. Thousands of stars, billions of worlds, countless possibilities stretched before him. The accidental touch at the Queen's ceremony, the trial of intent, the crisis, and the diplomatic negotiation, all of it had shaped humanity's reputation. He thought of the lessons learned. Instinct was important, but understanding was more valuable. Courage mattered, but patience was essential. Strength was not only physical or technological, it was moral, intellectual, and principled. The Queen watched silently from her throne across the assembly hall. She had expected arrogance, fear, or failure. Instead, she had found clarity, courage, and moral intelligence. Humanity had changed her perspective on what it meant to survive, to lead, and to be respected in a galaxy full of civilizations. The human delegation celebrated quietly, not with loud cheers or prideful displays, but with satisfaction, reflection, and determination. They knew the galaxy was vast, and challenges would continue. But for the first time they understood that humans were seen not as small, reckless, or foolish, but as a species capable of rising to meet impossible challenges. And in that recognition, humanity found its place. Not as conquerors, not as manipulators, but as observers, thinkers, mediators, and doers. Principled and strong, clever and patient, capable of turning instinct into action and mistakes into opportunities. The galaxy had begun to understand humans, and humans had begun to understand themselves. One accidental touch had sparked doubt. One trial had tested their intent. One crisis had proven their skill. One negotiation had earned respect. The Queen's final words to Elias summed it up perfectly. "Humans," she said, "may stumble, may misstep, may act instinctively, but when it matters you rise. You do not fear responsibility. You do not hide from consequences. You act with clarity and principle. That is why your species will endure, and why it will be remembered.
Elias bowed once more.
Thank you, Your Radiance. Humanity will honor this trust. The stars stretched endlessly before him. Humanity had entered the galaxy not quietly, but with an unmistakable presence. They had shown that even a small species with principle, patience, and intelligence could earn respect, navigate danger, and shape the future. And the galaxy would never forget it. Humans had arrived, and they were ready.